Hi, good morning, good afternoon and good evening to everyone. Welcome to this webinar dedicated to celebration of the World Patient Safety Day, named Making Medicine Safe and Reliable for All. This year's theme has not come out of the blue. This is something that the WHO and the patient organizations, all the other stakeholders as well, have been working for years, including the Medication Safety Challenge. So this year we have dedicated to the medication safety, and this is medication errors and medication safety are really not new. They date back to the time of Paracelsus, when he noticed, without any technological advances, simply by observation, that actually the dose is what makes the medicine the cure or a poison. However, years from then, and many technological advances discovered in the meantime, used in everyday healthcare and everyday life, we still struggle with the medication safety. And the medicines need to be really providing us cure and improve the quality of life, but they need to be more than that as well. They need to be safe. So there is where this theme comes from for this year. However, before starting, I would like to congratulate to everyone the World Patient Safety Day, now marking for the third year, to congratulate every colleagues, friends, activists, patient advocates, patient groups, all the other stakeholders for marking the day over the past few days, especially 15th, 16th, and the 17th of September. We have been seeing a lot of people reporting their events through the Global Patient Safety Network. I encourage you to join it, because you can there find allies and colleagues working on similar issues to yours. But first and foremost, or let's say most of all, I would like to congratulate the WHO for organizing the event last Friday, where the DDG, Susanna Jakob, expressed her commitment in pursuing this Global Patient Safety Action Plan adopted a couple of years back at the World Health Assembly. But behind that Global Patient Safety Action Plan is actually a key figure from the WHO, which is our keynote speaker today, Dr. Neelam Dhingra, who is the one that has been the motor and the ally and really the driving force behind this Global Patient Safety Action Plan. As you can see on the slide here, the race or the process has been one dating 20 years back, and finally we have got our Patient Safety Action Plan adopted, and we are now in a position to really try to implement and improve the care, both from the safety and quality aspect as well. So without much ado, I would like to invite our keynote speaker, Dr. Neelam Dhingra, who is the head of the World Patient Safety Flagship Initiative. But as I said, she's the driving force behind this Global Patient Safety Action Plan. And most importantly, she is the biggest long-term friend and ally of patients and their safety. Welcome, Dr. Neelam.
Good morning, Nada, and thank you so much for this kind introduction. And greetings from the World Health Organization in Geneva to all the participants and panelists. I am so grateful for the organizing committee to invite me to join you for this unique and extremely important event, Making Medicine Safe and Reliable for All. Because I think this event has its outreach to all members of the International Alliance of Patient Organizations, International Council of Nurses, International Pharmaceutical Federation, the World Medical Association, International Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers and Associations, Organization of Pharmaceutical Producers of India, Medicines of Malaria Ventures. All the organizations have come together in a very unique way, covering the entire chain of processes in medication safety. I congratulate the leadership of these organizations for their exemplary collaborative and strategic approach, bringing key global healthcare stakeholders, particularly from those in the front line and the point of care, representing patients, nurses, doctors, pharmacists, working in a patient-centered and and also the manufacturers and producers. So my congratulations again for organizing this event to mark the World Patient Safety Day, and also my best wishes to the World Medical Association for their 75th anniversary year. As Nada, you mentioned about the World Patient Safety Day, and the theme for this year which is very much linked with the WHO Patient Safety Action Plan, which is really the foundation for our strategic and sustainable action for next 10 years. This provides a roadmap to countries around the world and organizations to have a concerted effort for next 10 years to work on patient safety. As you're aware, this action plan was adopted by the 74th World Health Assembly in May with a vision of zero harm. And truly speaking, in this context, the medication safety theme has been selected so that we could work together for medication without harm. Because medication without harm truly elaborates the quest to achieve the global vision of zero patient harm by improving medication safety. And I must say that it also provides an opportunity to show the commitment of making patient safety as a global health priority. So with those few words, I would like to share with you a couple of slides to walk you through the journey, particularly on the action plan, as well as how we have, in the last couple of years, been able to take forward the global agenda. So if I could have the rights to share my slides, please. Thank you. So I'm going to present very briefly about the decade of patient safety and how the Global Patient Safety Action Plan has provided the impetus and the platform for WHO to declare a decade of patient safety 2021 to 2030, and how the World Patient Safety Day this year has brought together all key stakeholders to work for medication without harm. We all recognize that no one should be harmed in healthcare. We as patients and families, when we go to a health service, we are never expecting to be harmed. But there's a huge body of harm, as you're all aware, that adverse events are likely to be one of the 10 leading causes of death and disability worldwide. Even in high-income countries in the hospitals, 1 in every 10 patients is harmed. It is estimated that around 134 million adverse events occur each year in hospitals in low and middle-income countries alone, which contribute to 2.6 million deaths. That is, every minute, 5 patients are dying only in hospitals in LMIC. This doesn't count for primary care services, doesn't count a global figure. These are huge, shocking numbers, and we really have to put our efforts together to address the issue of patient harm, because this harm is not acceptable. There has been a global patient safety movement, as you are aware, since 2016, when the political leadership from the UK and Germany came together and started an annual Ministerial Summit series on patient safety, bringing together health ministers and leaders from around the world. So we had 4 successful summits in London, Bonn, Tokyo, and Jeddah, supported by respective governments. And the next summit is now being hosted by the Swiss government in February 2023. WHO has been at the forefront and providing the leadership globally on the agenda of patient safety, working together with all the countries who are committed on patient safety. And you're aware that this led to the important resolution on global action on patient safety, established the World Patient Safety Day, and also asked WHO to work on the Global Patient Safety Action Plan, which then was, with the efforts of stakeholders in WHO, over a period of 2 years, we're working together with every stakeholder. And it was launched by the DG on the 4th of August last year, after the adoption by the World Health Assembly, and which also has a mandate for us to report back to the Assembly every 2 years how we are progressing. So it's a huge, huge opportunity for us to, over a period of 10 years, show significant reduction in harm, which we can achieve through our collective efforts. So to take forward WHO leadership and action on patient safety, aligned with the Global Patient Safety Action Plan, WHO has launched a Decade of Patient Safety, which provides several key programmatic elements, particularly, of course, on World Patient Safety Day, catalyzing and facilitating this opportunity to bring together topics of concern which need to be addressed, and where we really need to make it aware to political leaders the huge body of harm and how to address that. Implementation of the Global Patient Safety Action Plan, the Global Patient Safety Challenge and Medication Without Harm, bringing together countries and partners in global patient safety collaborative and networks, developing standard guidelines and tools, and investing into system for patient family engagement. And this slide just provides the overview of the action plan, which with a vision of a world in which no one is harmed in healthcare and every patient receives safe and respectful care every time, everywhere. This action plan provides 7 strategic objectives which address patient safety in a holistic and systems approach manner. So policies for zero patient harm, high reliability systems, particularly looking at human factors as well, safety of every clinical process, patient and family engagement, how we empower patients and families and caregivers so that they can play their role in patient safety and safety of healthcare system broadly. Health worker education, skill and safety, because health worker safety and patient safety are two sides of a coin. And it's very important to ensure health worker safety and also sufficiency so that the staff shortages do not affect patient safety. Information, research, and risk management through collection of data, reporting and learning systems, and then taking action on whatever learning we have from harm and errors. And then synergy, partnerships, and solidarity with all the partners, with all the programmatic elements in a government, so that we could approach this in a very cohesive and holistic manner aligned with the universal health coverage and sustainable development goals direction. The action plan provides us a framework for action, which is a 7x5 matrix. Each of these 7 strategic objectives have 5 strategies on which action is requested for key stakeholders, which include governments and government agencies, healthcare facilities and services and their leaders, all stakeholders, which includes patient organizations, civil society organizations, professional bodies, academic institutions, research institutions. So anybody who has a role to play in patient safety, they are our stakeholders, in addition to the government and government agencies, and WHO through 3 levels of the organization. Just want to show you 2 slides before I switch to another area of the decade of patient safety. On the action plan, we are urging countries to take 10 key actions for implementation of the action plan, which is develop a national patient safety action plan and also identify a focal point at national level who can spearhead and also coordinate the efforts of patient safety programs. Establish a patient safety incident reporting and learning system, implement the Global Patient Safety Challenge and Medication Without Harm, celebrate and observe and maximize the impact of World Patient Safety Day each year, dedicated to a different theme, but bringing that to the forefront and with focused action and also attention. Operationalize a national patient safety network, bringing together all stakeholders, incorporate the patient safety curriculum to build capacity for medical, nursing, and other professional education. Report progress on patient safety through the World Health Assembly, through the Member State Survey, which we are going to roll out this month. Institute a policy of having patient representative in all hospital governing bodies to begin with, and then at all facility levels. Then prioritize and provide resources to patient safety programs, and also strategize patient safety as a force multiplier for health service improvement programs so that we can have a coordinated approach to other programs which are ongoing in the country. So moving to the World Patient Safety Day and what is its importance and impact? As any day, it was established to raise global awareness on the issue of patient safety and also enhance patient engagement. They have been, every year there have been specific themes, and this is the 4th time we are observing the World Patient Safety Day. And the theme this year is medication safety with the slogan, Medication Without Harm. And why did we choose medication safety as a theme? As you recognize, huge burden of medication harm, which is avoidable. 50% of overall avoidable harm actually comes from medication harm. Medication errors are one of the main causes of avoidable medication-related harm, and huge amount of global health expenditure happens because of medication errors. The highest rate of avoidable medication harm actually occurs from multiple stages of the medication, but primarily from prescribing, administering, and monitoring stages. WHO identified the issue of medication safety and the unsafe medication practices in 2017 when the Global Patient Safety Challenge was launched on medication without harm. This was launched at the 2nd Global Ministerial Summit in Bonn, Germany. And through this, WHO has provided a strategic framework for action on different domains, which then will provide a holistic approach to addressing medication safety. And these are patients and the public, medicine, health and care workers, systems and practices of medication, and also high-risk situations and polypharmacy and transitions of care are the key action area where we really need to take priority action. Some of the initiatives the WHO has had with this identification of the theme for this year, which has really consolidated our work of the ongoing global patient safety challenge through taking forward the No Check Ask campaign in a very focused way, patient family engagement, monthly webinar series for medication safety, a study on burden of medication-related harm at the global level, medication safety curriculum, several medication safety solutions for vulnerable population and clinical risk areas, and a global event, as Nada mentioned, which really attracted, and we worked together with all stakeholders to make it happen. Just when I'm finishing my presentation, I just want to highlight that one of the objectives of this World Patient Safety Day is to enhance interaction between health workers and patients. And the No Check Ask campaign, which we are rolling out this World Patient Safety Day, really calls for action by health workers as well as by patients. So health workers and patients, before they give and before they take it, they have to know, check, and ask on both sides. So they have to know what medication they are giving and what medication they are taking. They have to understand their medication. And it's extremely important that we improve medication literacy in this area. And we believe that the 5 moments of medication safety, which is actually a patient engagement tool, would help in this process of enhancing engagement and interaction between health workers and patients. Some focused action at national level is required, both for early priority actions in the 3 areas which I mentioned, and also developmental programs, which also have action related to the 4 domains which I had explained earlier. And we believe that the Global Patient Safety Action Plan would actually provide a great platform for countries to embed all the action related to medication without harm as part of the strategic approach to improving patient safety and demonstrating a significant reduction in medication-related harm over a period of 10 years. So with that, I would like to conclude. We did actually turn the world orange on 17th September. This is a beautiful jet dot lit up in orange color. And with that, my call for action is join us in achieving medication without harm. With that, I would like to thank you immensely for your time and giving me this opportunity to participate today and join me today. Over to you, Nada. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Neelam, and we hope you will be staying with us until the end when we have the Q&A from the participants. This was supposed to be a face-to-face event, I forgot to mention in the beginning, but due to the circumstances of the travel at the moment, we organized it virtually, which gives us actually the benefit of having the possibility to welcome everyone from across the globe, and we have 300 participants already joining us today. So thank you very much for sharing your ideas, for sharing the policy frameworks of the WHO, and also the action or the activities that have been taken by WHO. The last couple of slides that you presented actually are a very nice transition into the second part of this webinar, where we will be looking into some examples of how different stakeholders have ensured at least some sort of improving patient safety through their actions. As I said in the beginning, and as you have rightfully pointed in your presentation, there are policies, there is a commitment by WHO and by its member states by adopting the Global World Patient Safety Action Plan and the declarations. And within that, it gives us really the enabling environment for the rest of us to help. We heard from you the key actions that you or WHO requires or asks from the government, but then all the other stakeholders can either join those actions or take some on their own in order to not only fulfill the action plan, but also to really try and achieve zero harm in healthcare. This is as I mentioned, your slides were really a nice introduction to the second part of the webinar, which is titled Patient Safety in Action, Examples of Initiatives to Ensure Patient Safety. We will be hearing a couple of examples from our colleagues. The 2 speakers that we have today, which will be presenting their examples or their initiatives, are Dr. Sergio Caballero from IFPMA. I'm sorry, Sergio, if I mispronounced your family name. He's in the Regulatory Affairs Manager at the IFPMA, and he's really very passionate about highest attainable standards in medication safety and medicines. And then Adam Aspinall, who is from the Medicines for Malaria Venture, but more importantly, he is executive chair of the Fight the Fakes Alliance, and he's a passionate fighter and advocate against falsified and substandard medicines. So I would like to first invite Sergio to tell us more about the digital solutions as useful and helpful tools in patient safety and medication safety through the electronic labeling. Sergio, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Nada. Thank you for the introduction. So today I'm here to talk to you about a digital solution to improve patient safety and also make it easier for industry and regulatory agencies around the world to deal with labeling of medicines and to illustrate the importance of that for patient safety. So if you go to my next slide. So if you, okay, I see that my audio is bad. Maybe I'll try without
Sorry,
my...
yeah, Sergio, there is some problem with the audio. Maybe you remove the headphone.
I'll try without my headphones, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Great. So before I go into e-labeling and the different benefits of e-labeling and why is it being implemented around the world, I think we all are aware that right now, if we have any questions or if we want to know about something, we all turn to our phones or to our computers and Google whatever question we have, and we come up with multiple answers, not all of them the most accurate, but we all know where to turn to when we have some specific questions. And we probably do the same for most of our medicines, right? If we're taking medicine, we don't know exactly, you know, what to do if we missed a dose of antibiotic, or what, you know, what are the side effects expected for some particular medicine that we're taking. What we'll probably do is we'll Google the information and try to find what is the right answer. Of course, most of these information can be seen in each product leaflet. So that huge paper that you see on the screen that usually comes with the box of medicines that you're taking. But it's true that we all see that it's not practical. It's difficult to update these papers. It's static because it's the same for everyone, and you cannot search around the paper, and it's not personalized. So what e-labeling is trying to do is to make sure that all these very detailed and actually good source of information that we have in each product information leaflet is also easy to use when we in a digital format by the use of digital tools such as computers and mobile phones. So on my next slide, I just wanted to again make it clear what do we mean by e-labeling. Sorry for the colors are a bit changed, but what I have written here is that we consider, or we're talking about e-labeling in this context as any dissemination of product information using a digital format. So instead of using the leaflets, or while still using the leaflets, also having or giving patients the possibility to consult this information using virtual tools. And how would that happen? So usually what we see in countries that have already implemented e-labeling is that with the use of a camera, you can scan a QR code or a different sort of similar code with your mobile phone, and that will redirect you into a web page where you have all the information in a format that can be much more interactive. And why is this important? I mean, I think the first and most important aspect is that it's really much better for patients and for healthcare professionals, because you have, as I said before, personalized information. and up-to-date information. So it's much easier to update a leaflet that's in a digital format than to have to print out new leaflets or recall the product if there's a really important update that has to be given. There are also supply chain benefits and general benefits to the resilience of the supply chain in general, but I'll talk to that a little bit later on. So in this slide, it's really just to illustrate, I won't go into the details, but to sort of give you a sense that this is already a reality in many countries. I think it's fair to say that Japan has been at the forefront of this technology. They've already eliminated paper inserts in most countries, because usually what we see is a stepwise approach in terms of introducing e-labeling. So of course, we would always start with first having both the paper insert and the digital format, with the ultimate goal being to remove paper, also because of the substantial environmental impact that has. But it is already a reality in many places around the world. On my next slide, I have some of the benefits of e-labeling for patients and for healthcare professionals. And I think here's really the main slide and the key items that I wanted to bring to your attention today. So as I was saying before, because e-labeling is dynamic, so you can think of it as any website that you consult with using your phone or your computer. It can really be adjusted to each user's preference to how they want to see this information being displayed. So on one hand, we can have both healthcare professional and patient-centric information, which is really important, because if you want to add more detail to a leaflet, it can become quite difficult for some patients to understand. But it's also important to have that information there so that the healthcare professional can give that more detailed counseling to a patient. So with e-labeling, we can have the two types of information there, and depending on who's consulting the information, you can have different layers of complexity inserted in this page. Because this is a dynamic format, sorry, on the previous slide, because this is a dynamic format, you can also add not only text, but also audio or visuals. And this is particularly important for combination products or medical devices. When you have to use a syringe, or when you have to use an inhaler, for example, it's much easier if you have a video, right, showing you how to use it instead of just reading all the instructions. So it really opens up so many possibilities that make it, it's really easy to understand how it becomes much more intuitive for a patient to consult this information. Of course, as with any website, it's easy to adjust the font size to improve readability to patients. It's also easy to try and find information, like with the Control F command that we have on our keyboards. And it's also a way to facilitate information sharing between patients, their families, and their caregivers. So these are the main benefits for patients and for healthcare professionals. And I also wanted to talk to you about the benefits for the supply chain. And you can see on my next slide that this was quite well illustrated during the COVID-19 pandemic, because when there's an increased demand or a disruption in the supply chain, and there's a need to deploy products to different countries, so having this cross-border shipments, it's very useful to have e-labeling so that we can adapt the language, let's say, for example, the language of the product to be deployed in a different country. And that can be done pretty much automatically, right? I mean, it's, of course, you still have to go through all the same safeguards and procedures to update this, but it's much easier to update an electronic version of the leaflet instead of having all the recalls or having to do all the printouts again. So this was very well illustrated during COVID-19. And of course, it's the speed to which you can actually, for example, when talking about side effects, report the side effects, having the national regulatory authority looking at all this information and updating the leaflet accordingly. It's also much faster when you use e-labeling. So that's also a way in which e-labeling benefits patient safety and avoids medication harm. And then on my next slide, I think it's also important to mention, the different aspects of how we want to implement this in a regulatory framework. So if you could go to my next slide. So yeah, this is just an overview of the different benefits that I just mentioned. Maybe one that I haven't mentioned so much is the less waste of paper. But this is really a big deal because a lot of the medicines and vaccines that we use nowadays have a lot of leaflets, not only the ones we see on the box, but many others, especially when used in hospital context that can really have an impact in terms of environmental gains. And then moving to my next slide, this is what I was mentioning in terms of the regulatory framework and stepwise approach to implementing e-labeling, because I think it's also important to mention how countries can implement this in a sustainable manner. If you move to my next slide, please. So here you can see it doesn't have to be, the first step already implementing a system that works for everyone without a paper leaflet. What we would rather advocate for is to have first the approved product information available in any electronic format. So that doesn't necessarily need to be in the product box or with e-labeling. And then we would go in a stepwise approach all the way to having a structured format to enable searching and interoperability with other systems, with the searchable function that I was mentioning, the addition of video and audio and all that. So this is really like the ultimate goal, but it's also important to show that countries can do this in a stepwise approach, so it doesn't look like an inachievable goal. And yeah, just to conclude, I think it's important to say that also we have had good feedback from the WHO that this is also an interesting initiative from their side. They recognize the added value to patients, to healthcare professionals, to industry, and to regulatory agencies. We've seen the added value of e-labeling being recognized and mentioned in the recommendations from the 2021 ICTRA. So as the research-based biopharmaceutical industry, we are really open to partner with different stakeholders, share our expertise in this field, and continue to advocate for implementation of e-labeling through the stepwise approach and the roadmaps that we have developed with our different working groups. And with that, I conclude my presentation. Thanks everyone, and I'm happy to answer any questions when we have time. Back to you, Neda.
Thank you. Thank you, Sergio, for this very, very important initiative, I would say. There is quite an interest in the slides presented so far by Dr. Nilam and by yourself, probably for the remaining of the slide deck. So we will be able to provide them to everyone. Thank you all for the interest, because there is quite a rich number of information that you shared and Dr. Nilam shared. So people would need time to really read and digest. I would say this is an important initiative because it really, the personalized healthcare becomes more and more of an issue, and patient safety is a very personal and needs personalized approach, because every patient is different and every patient safety issue is really very patient specific. And that's why e-labeling is one of the quite important aspects of ensuring patient safety, and using the digital aids that we have to help us achieve that patient safety. There are quite a few questions in the chat as well. We will be taking them after we round up this part of the webinar. In other aspects, so please ask your questions in the chat. We will be, of course, addressing all of them as they come along, as time permitting. So as I mentioned, the e-labeling is really very important in helping us achieve the patient safety. But in another sense, I think it might, if we can have the next slide, I think it can also, and the next then, I think we can also use the e-labeling to raise the awareness, especially on the antimicrobial resistance. And antimicrobial resistance might not sound like something completely and directly related to the patient safety, although everyone on this webinar, I'm sure, is aware of the importance. But antimicrobial resistance is also a patient safety issue in the long term, because once we get the antibiotics not working, or once we reach that stage, it will not be possible to make the healthcare safe anymore, because we will be deprived of having safe surgeries, or treating some ailments, or helping patients with who are immunocompromised, and so on. So in this sense, I will be presenting very briefly to you from the patient perspective. I didn't introduce myself at the beginning. My name is Neda Milevska-Kostova, and I'm the chair of the governing board of the International Alliance of Patient Organizations, and at the same time president of IAPO's established Patient for Patient Safety Observatory, which hosts the Amr Patient Alliance. And the Amr Patient Alliance is really the movement of all patient and civic society organizations and individuals who are interested to address this issue from different aspects. And the importance of it, you can see on the left-hand side of this slide, which really shows that, and it was a paper published last year in Lancet, and it is really showing the magnitude of deaths we have and the global burden globally we have at this moment caused by resistance. So, but then AMR, same as patient safety, is very cross-cutting issue. And therefore, there are very few organizations that are really working only on AMR. And therefore, we decided that it might be the best to organize ourselves around this issue in a patient alliance, which has developed a call to action. And it really shows the commitment to intersectoral collaboration. You can see the 4 domains in which we think it's important to work, and that is strengthening the health literacy. As I said, the e-labeling might be able to help us improving diagnosis and evidence-based solutions, patient-centered approach, in-access research and design. We really believe that the patient engagement needs to be at the center of this approach, because every patient matters, and every patient and citizen and caregiver can contribute in the fight with the AMR, because we want to preserve the antibiotics for as long as possible, for as many patients as possible, and then strengthening the holistic public health measures. And with this, we also developed a special website. You can see the QR code. You can scan it from your screens now if you would wish to join us to have the collaborations on this issue, because it is really cross-cutting, and it will help patient safety on a long run. If we can have the next slide. And this is just to illustrate what the AMR Patient Alliance have done so far. We have been established last year. So within a year, we try to work towards eliminating human-induced AMR worldwide. We know that the microorganisms naturally evolve and create resistance, but we as humans are really fueling it. And we are doing it to our own disadvantage, because we will lose the major discovery of the medicine, which are the antibiotics. These are some of the people that have joined us so far. As I said, you can scan the code and maybe join us too. We are also in the sense of helping the patient safety on a long run. We have developed more than 1,000 entries, repository, resources in English, Spanish, and Italian so far. We are creating one in German and French at the moment. And those are all the information, materials, tools, videos, all kinds of resources that are aimed at helping different patient groups with different diseases to really understand what AMR is and how that relates to them. So we would like to also link with the e-labeling initiative in that respect. But of course, we can and should preserve the antibiotics to be efficacious and to work in fighting the infectious diseases. But it's not only in our hands to preserve them by not taking them unnecessarily. It is also to really be aware that there are medicines that are not up to the standards, that are really not helping the patients, but are harming. And with this, I would like to invite our next speaker, Adam Aspinall, who is the executive chair of the Fight the Fakes Alliance, who will be telling us a little bit more about fake medicines, how we fight the fake medicines production, distribution, and use as part of the not only the entire patient safety, but in particular the medication safety in our system. So Adam, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Neda, and thank you to the organizers for the invitation to join this really important event, and congratulations for pulling together such an important event to celebrate World Patient Safety Day. So as Neda said, I'm Adam Aspinall. It's my privilege to be chair of the Fight the Fakes Alliance, which is a not-for-profit organization based in Geneva. And in my day job, I'm working in access to medicines for Malaria Venture, which is a not-for-profit also based in Geneva, working to develop novel anti-malarial drugs. What I'd like to do over the next few minutes is to share with you a little bit about the Fight the Fakes Alliance and how we're working to protect patients. I'm sure that everybody on this call, and I had a quick look at the attendances, and it's really encouraging to see a huge spread from all over the world. But everybody will know that this is an issue that affects everybody. It doesn't matter where you are. Certainly lower and middle income countries are disproportionately affected, but this is something which affects every single one of us. So the Fight the Fakes Alliance was set up as a multi-stakeholder, non-profit organization, really dedicated to raising awareness and to influence change in the fight against falsified and substandard medicines. Part of its strength is in the breadth of its membership. We have members representing industry, not-for-profit organizations, professional organizations, academia, and actually many others. We recognize that this is a huge problem which cannot be solved by one organization alone. So what we try to do is to leverage the expertise, the knowledge of every one of our stakeholders in order to be synergistic. We're trying to build a global movement of organizations and individuals, all of whom have the same common interest, which is fighting this scourge, to help raise awareness and shine a light on the threat represented by these things. So it goes without saying that when patients go to their healthcare professional and they're prescribed a drug, they have every right to expect that the drug is going to be safe and it's going to make them feel better. And sadly, we know that this isn't always the case, particularly in lower and middle income countries, where falsified and substandard medicines are a fact of life. And as Dr. Dhingra said in her introduction, patients should be able to expect safe and effective medicines. And that brings me on to my next slide, which is why we're here in the Fight the Fakes Alliance. I'm sure many of you have seen these statistics before, but I do think it's worth taking a second to think about what they really mean. The WHO estimates that in lower and middle income countries, up to 1 in 10 of all medicines that are given out are either falsified or substandard. Just think about how many medicines get prescribed or sold every single day in a continent like Africa. If a 10th of those are either going to be ineffective or, even worse, poison patients, you can imagine that the impact is absolutely immense. So although falsified and substandard medicines do affect every single country, we know that lower and middle income countries are disproportionately affected. Secondly, we know that although every therapeutic area can be affected, even areas like chemotherapeutics, there are some therapeutic areas which are more affected than others. And they include my own area, which is antimalarials, cardiovascular disease, antimicrobials, and so on. And one of the, I guess, the unexpected consequences of the COVID pandemic was that it shone a light for many people for the first time, particularly in more developed countries, about the existence of falsified and substandard medicines, whether it was with hydroxychloroquine or PPE or vaccines. So I guess that was a kind of unintended benefit. But if we take malaria as a particular example, it's been estimated that up to 155,000 children every single year are killed by falsified or substandard antimalarials. That's an absolutely staggering figure, which is, it's easy to quote statistics and kind of gloss over them, not really think about what they mean. But 155,000 children every single year is absolutely breathtaking. And this is absolutely not a victimless crime. The people that develop these so-called medicines know exactly that if they're faking life-saving treatments, then the patients who receive them are very likely to die. And that makes it, at the very best, manslaughter and possibly murder. What are the consequences of these so-called medicines? Well, the obvious one is a failure to treat disease. Many of these falsified or substandard medicines contain either no active ingredient or very little. That's kind of the best case scenario, in which case the medicine simply won't work. Very often, though, they also contain toxic substances which then poison the patients. So the result is injury, disability, and very often, unfortunately, death. If the drugs don't work, they'll need represcribing a more effective drug or one that does work. That has impacts on a country's healthcare system and economy. We've already talked about in the last presentation the development of resistance to drugs, very much the case for antibiotics and for antimalarials. A very small amount of active ingredient will help select for resistant parasites. And this is a huge problem. Everybody knows that malaria kills over 400,000 people a year. If the only effective drugs currently available, which are artemisinin-based combination therapies, start not to work, then you can imagine the consequences could be absolutely huge. So we talked about economic losses, but also it undermines trust in the medical profession, because if you go to your doctor, they prescribe a drug which makes you either sicker or worse, then clearly it has an effect on the reputation of the entire healthcare system. So next slide, please. I've already said that this is something which affects everybody, and it does. But the fact is that Africa accounts for more than 4 in 10 of all substandard or falsified medicines, which is clearly an absolutely staggering amount. This figure comes from the World Health Organization, but the problem is the reported figures rely on having monitoring and surveillance systems which are effective and able to track this. So the figures are only as good as the surveillance and reporting systems in the countries. So it's likely that the real figure is even higher. We know that around 20% of substandard falsified medicines are found in North and South America, and then a further 20% in the European region. This final bullet point you can see here is quite unbelievable, but estimates do show that in some parts of Africa, up to 7 in 10 of all medicines might be substandard or falsified. And so you can imagine the impact that will have on local healthcare systems, not to mention the patients and their families. Next slide. So that brings me back in closing to sharing a little bit about what we're trying to do to raise this. I mentioned the fact that this is something that requires partnership, joined up thinking between all agencies, whether it's WHO, industry, academia, and so on. And that's true. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do. So we have spent probably 7 or 8 years now trying to raise the profile of falsified and substandard medicines. We've done a lot of work on public awareness and education campaigns in Africa and in the center here in Geneva. We have ongoing awareness campaigns online. We share news and updates. We publish stories from people who've been affected by falsified and substandard medicines. On top of that, we've got a lobbying and advocacy activity. We have, for the last few years, given statements on the side of the World Health Assembly. We've had side meetings involving some of the leading researchers and world figures in this topic. We had one last year, which was chaired by Andrew Jack from the Financial Times, which was very successful in raising the profile of this issue. We've held workshops for specific audiences, for example, pharmacists and regulators in endemic countries. Media roundtables on fake medicines. We've published a huge number of articles and op-eds on the topic, again, trying to raise awareness. But at the same time, in future, we understand that strengthening of regulatory systems, improving detection and identification of falsified medicines is incredibly important. And these are all things that we are trying to focus on in our short to medium term as well. So I'll close with my final slide, which is just to say that every single one of us can be affected by these things and that our vigilance really can save lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Adam, for this, first of all, really staggering numbers. 10% of all the medicines being fake is really one in every 10 people. All of us know more than 10 people, so at least a couple of our friends might be affected, and probably more in Africa or in other continents where the regulatory bodies have just been established. We really hope with the African Medicines Agency, this will be an issue that will be addressed more and more and bring more and more safe medicines to that continent, because to us at IAPO, really every patient matters, no matter where they are, and they really deserve and they really are entitled to having safe care and safe medicines. Commendations or really great congratulations on the excellent presentation. I'm just echoing what is going on in the chat. There are many people really commenting on your presentation, exchanging between themselves. This is such a lovely chat going on. They're conversing between themselves. Unfortunately, as I said, we are in the webinar, but there will be an event that we plan at the beginning of December. So please, everyone, watch out for some more news. IAPO together with FPMA, probably a few of the other co-organizers that we are around the table today, Fight the Fakes Alliance as well, will be organizing another event, hopefully face-to-face in Geneva. So please watch out for that. But just coming back to your presentation, there is also one question. So before we go into the third part of the webinar, Jennifer asks, then how do we know that a medicine is fake? How can we, awareness raising that there are medicines that are fake is really important, but how do we know? And she says, the doctor prescribed it, so how can I be sure, or should I not trust? Or so if you can briefly just address that, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's a really good question. And one of the features of falsified and substandard medicines is that the people that produce them really are very good at what they do, unfortunately. And even for people who know what they're looking for, it can sometimes be incredibly difficult. When you look at 2 packs side by side, one of which is fake, one of which is genuine, it's very hard to tell. There are a lot of things that industry is doing to try and make it easier. One of them is making tamper-proof packs. They're incorporating things like holograms on the pack. I think you've heard, probably most of you, about schemes like the scratch and text schemes that many packs have, where you scratch off a panel, you send an SMS with a code number to the center, and then you get a text back saying whether or not it's false, and so on. But it is very hard to tell. This is why education and being aware that it's a possibility is so important. And the final thing I will say is that it's harder for falsified and substandard medicines to get into the supply chain in the public sector. So if you're getting a medicine from a hospital or a clinic, it's much more likely to be a genuine medicine. If as is the case in many countries, the drugs come from street vendors or unofficial sources, they're far more likely to be falsified. And the final thing I will say is that in particularly some of the more developed countries, it's been estimated that the vast majority of drugs which are available online from unofficial online pharmacies are fake. So I would never touch one of those with a barge pole.
Yes, thank you, Adam. There is still a discussion ongoing in the chat. I would like to invite everyone, if you can also suggest topics on which you would like to have next webinars that we can organize together with Adam, especially on Fight the Fakes, or on different topics related to patient safety and medication safety. Thank you, Adam, once again for joining and for this really important presentation. So I would like to now turn to the third part. There was one question earlier in the chat. It was directed towards Neelam and panelists. It was really sounded like we skipped it, but we didn't, because it really asked about what is the next logical step. And this is actually what we are considering to be the last but not the least part of the webinar, where we invite a very important panel of the key figures in healthcare, representatives of the professional associations and patient association, as is IPO, to really discuss what we can do in this enabling environment that now we have the policy frameworks and the Global Patient Safety Action Plan. What can we as separate or together as the different stakeholders do? And I would like to introduce the panel entitled Implementation of the Global Patient Safety Action Plan, Health Stakeholders' Contributions and Reflections, which really has the creme de la creme, I would say, but also people who are not only long years in the healthcare system, but they are also representing the different aspects, and we try to really work together to put the patient at the center of the healthcare. If we can have just one last slide that we had in the deck. Well, if not, then I will just introduce the panelists. Today we have, oh yes, thank you so much, Paloma. I think the discussion in the chat is so interesting that we almost forgot to look into the slides. And of course, as mentioned earlier, we will be sharing the slide deck with everyone, so you can really digest all the information being presented there. Please share your own resources in the chat as well, if you feel that it can be helpful to others or to us, and share ideas if you have for webinars, as I said. So this third part of the webinar, which we intend to capture your attention across the next hour, is really about how we can contribute to implementation of the Global Patient Safety Action Plan. We heard from Dr. Neelam that the governments are those that are really at the center, or maybe the main drivers of what can change at national level, and their voting or their adoption of the Global Patient Safety Action Plan speaks of the commitments, but the governments themselves only cannot do. We need to also involve ourselves, and we need to not only involve in the implementation, but also provide solutions, point to the problems, so work together. And this panel is really about asking different health stakeholders of what they think their role might be from their different chairs that they're sitting in. So today we have Dr. Ottmar Khloeber, who is the Secretary General of the World Medical Association. He's also a founding member of the World Federation of Medical Education, a global leader, innovator, and a visionary related to the medical profession. Then we have Hoishan Fokelade, who is a policy advisor at the International Council of Nurses. She is representing one of the key links in the chain of the safe medicine administration, I would say. We have then Zuzana Kusinova from the International Pharmaceutical Federation. She's experienced young professional with combined background in pharmacy and management, and whose goal is to really add value to global and local pharmaceutical and healthcare strategies and execution of those strategies. And last but not least, we have Greg Perry, who is the Assistant Director General of IPMA, and he's very passionate in safety and equity in the access to medicines through innovation, local manufacturing, access to health products, and regulatory strengthening. So the slide that we are having right now, I just asked to be brought up because just to remind us that of all of them, the patient, of all the stakeholders, maybe the patient being at the center is really what depicts the situation, because the healthcare systems, whether we admit it or not, they really exist for patients, and they need to be designed around patients and not around buildings and diseases, or they should be designed around the main stakeholders being the patient and the healthcare providers, which are in a way complementing or in a way on a personal level, really trying to address every single issue. And as this slide shows, the patient is the one that undergoes their own, they live with their experience, they live with their condition. They can really be also instrumental in bringing on the table observations and bringing on the table some solutions even, but together with other stakeholders. And without much ado, I would like now to invite Dr. Ottmar Khloeber from the World Medical Association to really tell us how he feels, what he thinks patient safety is, and what are the possibilities for the healthcare professionals or healthcare providers in different professions be able to contribute to implement to patient safety. Please, Ottmar, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nida, for inviting the WMA, and thank you very much also for very excellent presentations which we have heard. And let me put this just right up front. The Patient Safety Action Plan, the Global Patient Safety Action Plan, this is actually certainly correct. Everything that is in there is necessary and has to be done. And has to be addressed not only by us, but all participants in there. But let me take you out of the comfort zone here a little bit, and not believing that with that everything is charted and is done, because I strongly believe that patient safety doesn't work if there is no safety in healthcare in general. And there we have a big problem. First, let me reflect on a few items that have been already mentioned where I do not disagree with what has been said, but I would like to just stress that, of course, these are also items for the health professionals. Digital tools that have been mentioned before by Sergio are extremely important in the safety of pharmaceuticals and the application of medicines, not only on the patient side, which is important as well and can be extremely helpful as has been shown, but also on the side of the physician when you are prescribing medicines to cross-check, especially when it comes to polypharmacy and polymorbidity of patients, which of course in aging societies is utterly important. Digital tools become more and more important in order to find the right medicines or to exclude medicines which should not be used. I can only underline the topic of antimicrobial resistance, which has been mentioned there. This is of crucial importance because there's a high number of people who are dying every year because we have antimicrobial resistance. This is, of course, a major problem that health professionals, pharmacists, doctors, nurses have to deal with, have to be careful of. But it's also something for our healthcare systems when it comes to the design of hospitals, of facilities, of how we give care in facilities, for instance. And even more, it has to do with the fact that probably a tenfold of pharmaceutical, of antibiotics are being used in other areas than healthcare, namely in food production, not only for animals, but also for plants, in food production in general, as preservatives. All those produce resistance. And our politicians are not onto it, by far not. There have been a few measures that have been taken, but we are far away from really have safety in healthcare because there are still too many of those antimicrobials being used in other areas where they should not be used and should never be used. All of this produces danger to patients because they, in the end, have medicines which may not be powerful enough anymore in order to help them. We have to address this. There are streams which have been used for already for a long time and are still have to be developed. One is, for instance, the monitoring of pharmacovigilance. And this may be actually one of the tools for patients to deal with fakes. It's a post hoc solution, I agree. And finding fakes in the first place when you buy a pharmaceutical, when you buy a medicine for you as a patient, for me even, as a patient, being a patient with the training of a physician, this is very difficult, if not impossible. But the post hoc solution, which is there, or which is a tool to help, is very important. So if patients have the feeling that medicines don't work, if you have side effects that are unknown or you have observed, talk to your physician about it. Ask him about doing a report on it in the pharmacovigilance systems so that the experience can be collected and fakes can be found, identified, or even medicines which are inadvertently of bad quality, which also happens without any bad intention. But it is necessary that you talk to your physician about the observations which you have made in order to get a learning, in order to have a communication with them and really discuss this. We have other areas where the involvement of patient is much more is growing and is becoming of much more important, and that is basically everything from the start of in the research of medicines and testing of medicines in pharmaceutical trials, the development of those drugs in their application research that is being done, and finally, as I already mentioned, in the pharmacovigilance. So the patient involvement has become much more important, and also in the design of how we shape, for instance, pharmaceutical trials, the influence of patients and the cooperation of patients is certainly much more important than it has been. All of this is also under the headline of shared decision making, which is something that I think should be now standard in medicine, that not the doctor just prescribes something, but that you have a discussion with a patient about the patient needs, the preferences of a patient, and also the experiences of a patient that a patient has with a drug, as I mentioned before, not only in the view of pharmacovigilance, but also in the view of well-being and comfort for doing this. But, and here comes now my caveat with all of this. As I said, it's not enough just to talk about patient safety. We have to talk about healthcare safety. The pandemic has taught us that we have major deficiencies in nearly every healthcare system. We have seen shortages that should not have occurred when the pandemic hit us. We have seen shortfalls in staff in many, many areas and nearly all of the healthcare systems. All of this is something that really people are experiencing even under normal circumstances. We have very high burnout rates and attrition rates with many of the health professionals, whether that is nurses or doctors, in our healthcare systems, which are certainly avoidable and should be avoided by better staffing, by better material supplies to them, I'm not only talking about PPEs, I'm talking about the healthcare situation, the workforce situation in general with that. And these are political questions which have to be addressed and have not been addressed. I'm utterly depressed that even after the pandemic, the warning shot should have been heard. And it doesn't seem to be that the healthcare systems, that the politicians are reacting really in an appropriate way in order to fill the gaps which we have seen. And the gaps are really. We have seen that the healthcare personnel during the system has come under enormous stress. And even that was not enough. We also have seen a lot of aggression against healthcare personnel, sometimes from disappointed patients, sometimes from disappointed family members, or from communities which were in fear of health professionals returning from their hospitals to their homes because they thought they could be infected. So there's a lot that has to be done in order to improve patient safety, make it a part of healthcare safety in general. And that is still something that is before us, which has not been really tackled and will have to be tackled in order to make patient safety a reality. What we need underlying this is, I would say, a culture of responsibility for the healthcare system. And that is a responsibility we share. It's not only with the health professionals, with the physicians, the nurses, the pharmacists, the physiotherapists, and others. It's also a responsibility that is being carried to a large extent by politicians, by our societies at large, but also by us as patients. So a culture of responsibility would be really something that is necessary more than what we have seen so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ottmar. And actually, I'm very glad that you have taken a little bit more critical approach here, because these events are really to celebrate what we have achieved, but also to think about what would be the next steps, or what are the next logical steps, as Michaela, or one of the guests, one of the participants, has asked earlier. And I think your messages are very clear, stating that indeed the governments and many international bodies and many governments are really pointing to the need of shifting the investments in health upstream, rather in healthy lifestyles and so on. But until then, until those investments are really made and we have a healthier societies, we still need to invest in the healthcare systems. And even when those healthy lifestyles are there up and running for all of us, which is a utopia, we still need strong and resilient healthcare systems, and those ones that are really addressing not only patient safety, but as you said, also the health provider safety or the health system safety. But this involves the healthcare providers, and the secondary victim is not a new phenomenon. We just gave it a new name a few years back, and we really need to be aware of their own sufferings and their own issues when it comes to not providing the best care. And I was just in a meeting last week together with many providers, where I said, I just want to repeat that actually I think we are on the same side of the patients and the doctors. We both want what is best for the patient and what is most optimally achievable in the sense of preserving the health or improving the health, or getting the highest quality of life, if nothing more can be done with respect to the health. But that means, as you said, really investing in health systems as such, in their safety, in their interplayability, in their really becoming, as we once knew them, places that, or we still know them to some extent, places that can really make our lives or our health better, without fear, without fear of threat, or without safety issues as much as possible. But as Dr. Neelam mentioned in her presentation, and I remember we debated earlier that your perspective is not really only doctor's perspective, but the idea why we put it as a doctor's perspective in this webinar was because we are also going to be hearing from other healthcare providers. As Dr. Neela mentioned, there are practically three key points where the medication safety or issues related to medication safety occur in the system, and those are prescribing and administration and monitoring. With that, I would like to invite the second panelist to share her views. This is Khloeber Forkelade, who is the policy advisor of the International Council of Nurses. And really, the nurses are one of the key links in really ensuring safe administration, but also in the monitoring of the administered medicines and monitoring the patients, how they react, what are their feedback and observations. They would usually share those with nurses from my experience. So Khloeber, what would you consider that are the nurses or healthcare providers from your constituency investments or next steps and roles that we can play in improving patient safety and medication safety? Please.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you, Nida. And good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Happy World Patient Safety Day. And thank you very much for having me to be part of this panel. And I think it's wonderful to join the expert in this panel to highlight such an important issue in patient safety. And we can discuss further as part of the health workforce, what can we do to advance the global patient safety agenda. So my name is Khloeber Forkelade. I'm a policy advisor in the nursing and health policy team in the International Council of Nurses. So I'm very pleased to be here speaking on behalf of ICN and over 27 million of nurses worldwide. As some of you know, that ICN is a federation organization of more than 130 national nursing associations, and we call them NNAs. And ICN is founded in 1899, and we are the first NGO recognized by the World Health Organization. And we are also the first and widest reaching international organization for health professionals. So we all know that patient safety is fundamental to quality health and nursing care. And the primary role of a nurse in promoting patient safety is that of a patient advocate. And that includes, Ida, you already mentioned some of our duties and responsibility, is that we inform patients and others about risk and risk reduction. And nurses also advocate for patient safety and reporting adverse events. And nurses have a broad range of responsibility that have a direct bearing on patient safety. And some of those duties include, we monitor a patient condition, identify and report changes in the patient conditions, and detect diagnostic and treatment errors, and also administering medications. And we know that if the lack of accurate and current health information is a serious threat to patient safety and the quality of care. And ICN, we strongly believe that health outcomes are can be improved through the provision of high quality evidence-based health information to all healthcare providers, public, and also the patient. Hence, one important component to prevent errors is education, and patient safety is inseparable from the quality of nursing education. And we know that existing research shows that the introductions of patient safety should be part of the education of all levels of the healthcare system. And the quality of education delivered to nursing students or early career nurses can significantly reduce medical errors and improve the safety culture and quality of services. So in the view of that, I would like to share with everyone in this webinar, ICN is developing an online education model on patient safety, which will be available for free for nursing students around the world. And the program aims to provide competency-based education and also the skills to facilitate advancing the Global Patient Safety Action Plan 2021 to 2030. And in order to maximize the impact and the success of the educational models, and we want to make sure university and also education institute can offer this nursing education modules to their students or early career nurses. The patient safety model will be available in 3 languages, English, French, and Spanish. So please stay tuned on ICN website for further information, and we plan to launch the educational modules later this year. So now back to medication safety. And when we look at the common threats to patient safety, we are thinking about medication errors, hospital-acquired infections, patient falls, and the use of counterfeit medicines. And although human factors or human errors play a role in this serious adverse event, but there are usually inherent system factors, and we need to address those inherent system factors to prevent the error or reduce the likelihoods of their occurrence. But however, when we look at the current culture, we have the blame culture and around medicines era made by nurses, which is not very constructive to the advancements of patient safety. And we need to foster a just and fair culture and also supportive work environments to improve medication safety. What does it mean, a just culture? Which means when an incident happens, we need to investigate and understand the error. And we need to learn from the error and also to develop strategies to prevent the error and share the lesson learned with the staff. And as health leaders, they need to recognize the value of incident reporting. And the fundamental role of patient safety reporting system is to enhance patient safety by learning from failures of the healthcare system. And open reporting can lead to learning, not only at the individual levels for individual concern, but also for the organization they work in. So it's important to have a just culture rather than the one in which there is an immediate move to impose a sanction or refer the nurse to the national nursing regulator to make disciplinary actions. And what we really need is to improving medical safety. What we really require to improving medication safety is a shift from criminalizing and disciplinary mindset to really communication, and we start the dialogue that will lead to learning and improvement. And vitally, we can improve patient safety. And apart from fostering a just culture, I would really like to reinforce what Dr. Ottmar just mentioned, his key message about another element to improve patient safety and medication safety is safe working environment. So nurses, they have vital responsibility, like what I've mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, in the administration of medicines. But we also know that they are working in environments where they are often overstretched, they are short-staffed, and they are too busy to be able to give the high quality of care they want to. And there is strong evidence that inadequate institutional staffing levels are correlated with increase in adverse events such as medication errors, nosocomial infections and readmission rates that lead to longer hospital stay and increased hospital mortality rates. And also maldistribution of health workers and poor performance of staff because of high workload and prolonged working hours are also important determinants of patient safety. And medication safety is just an example of this type of error, and that we can have very serious implications for the well-being of patients and also nurses and the healthcare workforce. And so we all know that we also know that poor quality healthcare can cause substantial number of adverse effects and serious financial implications. So to conclude, I think ICNs, we believe that the enhancement of patient safety, including improving medication safety, involves a wide range of actions, including recruitment, nursing education, training, retentions of healthcare professionals, performance improvement, environmental safety, and also risk management. And in addition, we need to accumulate an integrated body of scientific knowledge focused on patient safety, and we need to have the infrastructure to support its development. So that's all for my presentation, and thank you for having me in this panel. And I look forward to discussing this further in the question and answer section. Over to you, Nida.
Thank you, Hui-Shan. I think your key message was that the education, one of the key messages is that the education is really key. I think links very well with Dr. Ottmar's message on having to breed the culture of responsibility, because we cannot ask responsibility unless and until we really equip people with the sufficient knowledge. And we know that through medical school there are many clinical aspects that are being taught and of course acquired by all the healthcare professionals, but then the specificities of each healthcare system, of each healthcare facility, and so on, and those are the aspects that we really need to capture if we want to really pursue with the culture of responsibility. We need to give advance, if I can say, or provide the safe environment, provide information on how to make that environment safer before we can ask any responsibility. And that goes both for the healthcare providers, but also for the patients. As we mentioned, we also have responsibilities, all of us, in caring for ourselves, but for the others as well. Thank you so much. I would like to now shift a little bit to something. I will be subjective here. I'm a pharmacist myself. And I think that the role of pharmacists in the healthcare system, but also in the broader healthcare sector, meaning not only the dispensing of medicines, but also their production, regulatory affairs, approvals, and so on, is really undermined and maybe underutilized. And I would like to invite my colleague Zuzana Kusinova from the International Pharmaceutical Federation to share with us what our role as pharmacists can be in improving patient safety. Please, Zuzana.
Thank you very much. Good morning, and thank you, Neda, for your kind introduction. FIP is the global organization representing pharmacists and also pharmaceutical scientists, and I will talk about the role of pharmacists in reducing medication errors and medication-related harm, and also how pharmacists contribute to medication safety. I would begin by saying that pharmacists are well positioned to minimize safety risk related to the entire medication use process. And as you said, Neda, it's including prescription, preparation, dispensing, administration, and monitoring. So this is by safeguarding accurate supply of medicines, by validating appropriateness of prescription and initiation of treatment, ensuring correct medication use, so checking the medicine and medicine interaction or food and medicine interaction, and adherence barriers, and educating patients. Also assisting interdisciplinary teams during the medication selection, use, and follow-up, warranting safety in transitions of care between healthcare units and the community. So really well positioned to minimize safety risks. And given this key position in the health system, FIP encourages pharmacists to take an active role in ensuring safer medication practices. Patient safety is a high priority for pharmacists and for FIP. Our commitment is visible through the FIP Statement of Policy on the role of pharmacists in promoting patient safety. It was adopted by over 140 pharmacy organizations around the globe. It is also in line with the WHO Global Patient Safety Action Plan that was presented at the beginning of this webinar, and it contributes to its implementation. The statement reiterates that pharmacists can improve patient safety by promoting patient engagement, interprofessional collaboration, and safety culture to reduce avoidable harm caused by medication errors. It outlines recommendations for practicing pharmacists working in various settings. I would just mention a few examples of the recommendations. This can be understood as the next steps. As Neda said, it is important to think what next steps are. So for instance, using the evidence to implement safety culture. There is no patient safety without a safety culture. We have heard from Hoishan how critical it is to shift from blame culture to safety culture. Another important recommendation is collaborating with other health professional associations to implement interprofessional strategies to foster close working relationships. In some countries like Canada, Interprofessional teams often review incidents to collaboratively identify actionable insights on how to improve medication use system and how to design systems with integrated safeguards. Many healthcare settings have interprofessional committees that regularly review medication incidents and tend to identify systemic factors to reduce incident recurrence. In Switzerland, there are the so-called physicians and pharmacists quality circles. They were formed of 5 physicians and 1 pharmacist. They evaluated the number of medical attitudes and agreed on a set of treatment options based on the objective of improving care quality. Afterwards, the prescribers put these strategies into practice. Findings of this evaluation of over 9 years showed that thanks to this interprofessional collaboration strategy, there was a greater compliance with guidelines, pharmacovigilance, greater use of generics, continuing education on the responsible use of medicines. In addition, these measures also resulted in reduction of costs of the treatment. It also showed positive impact on medicine stewardship, including attitudes to prescribing antibiotics. We have heard in the previous presentation on the importance of medication stewardship, especially in the AMR context. Another important recommendation or next step is developing educational tools to support appropriate pharmacist workforce development and safety culture. FIP, well, we have developed several educational programs like webinars, events, even webinar like this one, or reference documents, as well as toolkits for practicing pharmacists, such as the latest one is this year's Medication Review and Medicines Use Review Toolkit, and last year's Medicines Reconciliation Toolkit for Pharmacists. These tools offer support to pharmacists in promoting workforce development and safety culture. Other recommendations could be developing new services and health programs, but of course, securing appropriate remuneration models for them to make them sustainable. Advocating for access to patient medication history, especially for pharmacists, that's very important. Empowering and engaging patients to know, check, ask about their medication. Advocating locally and globally for the importance of pharmacies in patient safety. And in terms of advocating locally and globally, on a global level, FIP works closely with WHO and also with Nilam and Dr. Nilam on its patient safety program. For over a decade, we have been closely involved in both technical and policy work. We contributed to the WHO's guidance, reports and resources to more easily promote medication safety across different settings and health situations. For example, we contributed to developing the 5 moments for medication safety tool that Dr. Nilam presented earlier. We furthermore contributed to WHO technical documents for health professionals on medication safety in transitions of care, in high-risk situations, and polypharmacy. I'm sure you are all familiar with these resources. In terms of policy work, FIP was an early supporter of the WHO Medication Safety Challenge. We were proud to be an integral part of its official launch at the Summit of Health Ministers in Bonn in Germany in 2017. Since this launch, we have been promoting patient safety and advocating at the critical policy events. We took part in each of the annual Global Health Ministers Summits. The last one was in 2019 in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia before it was interrupted by the pandemic, but also there were virtual events that followed. We have also proudly supported WHO with the establishment of the World Patient Safety Day that was this Saturday, the fourth year, and I'm very glad to see that this day continued with strong celebrations all over the world, spurring global solidarity and action. So we are very pleased to have contributed to it annually. And just a few days ago, we took an active participation in the WHO World Patient Safety Day event, where we presented pharmacists' views. So in conclusions, in terms of how pharmacists can contribute to medication safety, well, we are in a unique position to address the challenges related to medication use and also to minimize safety risks related to the entire medication use process. Pharmacists can improve patient safety by promoting patient engagement, interprofessional collaboration, and safety culture. In FIP, we are representing voices of over 4 million pharmacists around the globe, and we have the visible commitment through collaboration with partners and at supporting pharmacists both at individual and systems or policy level. Thank you very much, Neda. I will give the floor back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Susanna, really for this multi-layered approach that FIP is taking, because the role, as I said, maybe I will be subjective, but the role of pharmacist is really a little bit different, because the pharmacist is part of the clinical team at the hospital, being together with the doctors, using their knowledge to pinpoint any interactions. The doctors, of course, don't always have the time to go through those, and the pharmacist role is key there. Also in terms of dosing, in terms of administration, advising, of course, not taking on their own, but advising. But then on the other end of the spectrum, being the frontline providers at the community level, because they can also then advise the patients, or they can discourage them from taking something that is not appropriate or necessary, especially in systems where we don't have airtight prescribing and dispensing practices. The role of the pharmacist here can be very, very big, and maybe, and as you mentioned, also in monitoring the safety, but also involving. Glad to see that FIP was involved in all these different policy level debates and engagements, and congratulations for participating in the WHO event on Friday. But nonetheless, without, and I just want to commend everyone. There is again a lot of exchange in the chat, a lot of ideas. I will refer to read them a little bit later. I just wanted to mention that pharmacist role is, as we said, part of the healthcare system, but in the sense of dispensing, sometimes advising the prescribing, but also to the side of really production of medicine, if you wish, and controlling the quality of the medicines. So last but not least, or at least the one before the last, because we have a surprise at the end of the program, I would like to invite Greg Perry, the Assistant Director General of the International Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers and Associations, to share his view on what the industry can do. As I mentioned, we can, the medicines should provide us a cure and be safe, but if there is no one to produce those medicines, we will not be debating about their safety. And I think the key player in providing us with medicines that can improve our life and improve our health and maybe bring us quality of life is the industry. So Greg, please, how would you see the role, and what would be your key messages in how we can improve the patient safety and medication safety, please?
Yeah, thank you very much. And we're delighted to be part of this event. And you know, I'd like to welcome all the participants that have joined. We know that we have well over 100 that have joined from different parts of the world. So that's wonderful. Before sort of answering your question directly, I'd just like to step back just a little bit and just make a couple of observations. I think the first one is clearly the continued importance of investing in resilient health systems overall, which is the sort of framework for ensuring that we have patient safety and adequate access to treatments to patients. I think the COVID-19 pandemic has taught us so much, including that we're only as strong as the weakest link, really. And we all have this important role to play, from the journey from the lab, from an industry point of view to ensuring the highest safety standards for patients. I think COVID-19 has shown in so many different aspects clearly the importance and the power of partnership. It's shown the clear importance of community and communities, and that relates directly to the roles of health professionals and patient safeties. It's shown the vital importance of having strong health systems, and unfortunately, we know that where there has been limited access, and there's been a number of reasons for that, certain cases, particularly in Africa, has been the result of limited health systems. I think it's also shown the overimportance of information, quality information, scientifically based evidenced information, and the need for that information to be properly communicated and balanced. And we don't have time to go into it now, but the amount of patient risk that has probably developed during the COVID through misinformation. Obviously, without saying the importance of collective action, and this event today shows the importance of bringing together patient organizations, doctors, nurses, pharmacists, as professionals, as carers, and as patients themselves, all of us, and to reaffirm our commitment in this. And then just on commitment, I think it's important here to just mention from an industry point of view, our commitment to the WHO's Global Patient Safety Action Plan. And I really valued the presentation this morning. And then finally, I think it's just important, as some of these overall points I wanted to mention that first, before I go into the role of the innovative industry, is really the power of youth. We've not mentioned very much of it today, but the power of youth as communicators, particularly of information, and the creators of very innovative ideas, and the importance of them being involved in debate and discussion. And the power of youth, I mentioned innovation. I think the second thing is the power of innovation and digital tools. So I just wanted to mention a number of those overreaching points of view. Now, coming back specifically to industry, we're involved from the beginning, from discovery to delivery and post-delivery, which I'll go into in a bit of detail. We often say that innovation is of limited use if it's not accessible to patients wherever on the globe. But I think we have to add that access is pretty futile if we're not assuring quality and safety to patients. So we often talk of innovation and access, but what I'm trying to stress here is that the third element of that, obviously, is the issue of safety. Now, the industry is, as mentioned, we're an intrinsic part of this equation in the journey of the medicine and the importance of patient safety. And we guarantee that all specifically at the drug development level. But let me raise 4 areas where industry has this multifaceted role. Firstly, in upholding the most rigorous regulatory standards for approval of treatment of vaccines. Secondly, investing in R&D to bring innovation, not just in the sense of new innovations that are more efficacious or approach diseases that may not have been covered, or with new innovations to treat those diseases, but also in drug administration and improving patient safety. Thirdly, in clinical trial design and implementation, where the role and participation of patients is important. And then fourthly, all the way to helping patient and caregivers in the access to information of our products. So the patient is obviously a central part in everything in which the industry is developing. I'd just like to spend a little bit of time on regulatory science, something that's particularly dear to my own heart. I'm part of an organization of regulatory professionals. I think the importance of the regulatory profession in itself is important because it's part of everything from discovery to research to market authorization and to post-market authorization. And that is why it's so important for companies to be involved at national, regional, global level in working with national regulatory authorities or international organizations such as ICH or the WHO, where we're looking at setting standards, having market authorization approval, and involving patients in that process. Now, we've learned a lot from COVID, as I've mentioned. We've actually put on the chat our lessons learned from COVID, which I invite you to read. One clear thing that came out of that was the agilities of the regulatory and clinical trial and quality process, which enabled the industry to rapidly develop and assess and obtain approval for its vaccine, but never at the expense of safety or at the patient. I showed great, I think, cooperation between industry, between regulatory authorities and other stakeholders. Now, on the regulatory side, as I mentioned, very important, the whole process that leads up to market authorization, ensuring that we have quality, efficacy, and safety. The importance of a functional pharmacovigilance system. And unfortunately, that is not the case in all parts of the world. And obviously, countries, lower middle income countries, have challenges in that area, which must be an area of strong focus for us all to work on, and ensuring that we can have functional pharmacovigilance systems wherever in the world. We need the timely and accurate flow of safety data between health authorities and national regulatory authorities, developers and manufacturers, because this will help in signaling any detection and prompt implementation of risk management strategies. Again, emphasizing where we need to do a lot more as a collective community in the area for low and middle income countries. And good manufacturing and good distribution practice, inspections which are part of that. All of this is about ensuring the monitoring of the quality of medicines, ensuring that they're legitimate, ensuring that they're safe. Now, we heard from Adam on the role of fight the fakes and the danger of fake medicines. We are actually part of that organization's Fight the Fakes Alliance. Some incredibly disturbing figures that Adam has mentioned to us. You know, 1 in 10 medicines in low and middle income countries are false. 4 in 10 of those are in Africa, and up to 7 in 10 in Africa could well be false. And we need to significantly address that as part of the global health strategy and the activities on the ground. I mean, these relate to issues like high reliability systems, information and risk management, which are all part of that strategy. We heard from my colleague Sergio, I think, on the e-labeling. And I do stress again the amazing opportunity that e-labeling will bring to health professionals and to patients through all the points that were mentioned by Sergio. But basically making information and the understanding of that information accessible to patients. For example, eventually on their smartphones, their mobile phones, in languages throughout the world. And you know, I've been talking to some young innovators in Africa about how we can convert those languages, not just in the standard French, English, and Portuguese, but into the many regional and national languages that exist on the continent. And finally, just a mention on AMR. The importance of dealing with AMR is so critical. It is really the silent pandemic. And again, I can only stress, as has been made by others, about the importance of dealing with this challenge. So finally, I'd just like to stress again the importance that we have to partnerships, to patient safety, to patients. In a sense, you know, we are all patients ourselves. Many of our family and friends will, as you all know, will be people who will be living with a health condition, which can be very challenging and at times destabilizing. But again, my final comment on this is that, you know, innovation is only worth it if it's accessible, and accessibility is only worth it if it's safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg, for this, for the key points, for the recommendations, the key messages. I can only add that regulatory aspects are not only prerequisite, but they are really a necessity, and they are really something that brings us a guarantee as patients that there will be a working drug, if I can call it in lay terms, that there will be improvement of health, as we heard before, and that the fight against the falsified medicines should not be perceived as a fight between the prudent and the unethical producers, but rather a fight against taking away healthy years of life, or taking lives even, as we heard. The figure of 155,000 children still stays with me since the earlier presentation. But all of those aspects and all of those partnerships that you mentioned, Greg, at the end, and they were really mentioned by the majority of the panelists, are really not only prerequisites, but also they are a necessity to be able to bring the patient safety and to enable the optimal, if not the best, care and safest, accessible, as you said, to the patients. So now I would like to invite my dear friend and a colleague, our CEO in the International Alliance of Patient Organizations, Kavaldeep Semi, to share the perspectives of the patients. Now, Kavaldeep, we have heard different stakeholders, but at the end of the day, it all boils down to what the patients get and what is our role, because the patient safety bears our name. So we really have to, you know, justify or show our perspectives and commitments of how we can improve the patient safety. Please.
Okay, thank you very much, Neda. Firstly, I must thank everybody, especially Ottmar, and I think he brought a very compassionate angle to this whole healthcare, that at the end of the day, we are all in this together, and we are all going to be under the knife or taking medicines, and there's always be risk. You know, healthcare, as you very nicely put, is not motor mechanics. You know, you've got certain things are mechanical. Every healthcare situation is at risk. You know, we never know. Our bodies are unique and they suffer differently. I think during COVID, we all realized that very fast, that here was a little virus and it left many with no symptoms whatsoever, others losing life, and in between the squealer, as I said, the damage long COVID wasn't. That woke us up that we are all unique, and therefore we need to share this responsibility together. I must thank Neelam very particularly on this, and WHO for having supported us all the way through. Yeah, this is not a 10-year struggle to get firstly patient safety on the calendar, and I think WMA and all of NSAs who are here, I must personally thank you, because I think without your shoulder and support and the shoulders to stand on, you know, as giants, I think the world may not have seen the way you brought us to see the patient safety issue. And this, I think, at this time of the year, prepares us very nicely for the summit, the Global Ministerial Summit that's happening next year in Geneva, in Switzerland. And I am urging everybody of your organizations to please, let's go there in one voice and one agenda, because in the past, I know Honorable Jeremy Hunt, Neelam, and others, especially Sir Liam Donalds and others, have really pushed for this agenda, and liberal and very outreaching governments like Germany, you've got the UK NHS, have all stepped in and brought in people, but the ministerial components were always, under the 50s. We attracted 116 member states to the Queen's funeral. I want to match that. Let's have 116 member states ministers there in Geneva at this time, because I think it's a very important issue. It's a global issue. It's far more pressing on us right now. And it's a time for the Director General also to take notice that we are helping him towards him writing his report. He has to report in 2023 of what has happened on the Global Patient Safety Action Plan and how that has been implemented. And we are helping him. I think he is welcoming this. And let's all work together and get our individual reports, what we have done through our NSA collaborations or others, and let's produce a joint report on that. From the points that we have raised, one of the most important point I'm picking out here is vulnerable groups. How are our patient safety issues being addressed in vulnerable groups? And this is something that we did in our Latin American Patients Congress. We looked at the indigenous populations in Latin America, looking at in Australia, in other parts of the world. And we found that very often many of these communities are left unaddressed. Even the United States, the Native American reservations have some very poor patient safety record. Those are left out. We need to bring those in. Also, the LGBTQ+ community, I think that's brought up very urgently, because I think they not only suffer discrimination from point of view of access to healthcare, but also when they're provided healthcare, it's very derogatory. It's I've witnessed one of these occasions, and it is one of the worst sort of healthcare provisions that I've ever seen. We need to bring those communities in. Also, from mental health point of perspective, I think again, all of our partners here raised that issue again from mental health patients. Their need is absolutely critical, in that here is a patient who doesn't even realize they're under immense danger in some of the products they're using and way they prescribe, and very often violence upon the patient themselves, and even violence upon the health professions. I think that's something ICN and the Ottmar remembers. Very often doctors and nurses are injured or killed sometimes in some of these encounters. So it's very important to bring them on board. And it's very important also to look at the academics. We continue to say that, and Ottmar again put it very neatly. It's an evidence-based plan. It's got everything in it. It's like the kitchen scene and everything. All we now need to implement it and take it forward. I think Neda, again, with the observatory, IAPA observatory, I think is a very good tool now. It's ready, it's come of age. I think the last 3 years, it's so unfortunate because of the pandemic. Everything was so flux and unmoving. Now we are in a very stable situation. I think let's spread our wings and let's start taking on board some of these evidence production that we need from both patient side and also from the journal value chain, and let's bring it all together and make sure we are there during the Global Patients Summit. Yeah. And lastly, I think, Neda, you can finish off with anything else that you have, and maybe I could invite some others to say something on this. But I think many of you have answered your colleagues. The peer-to-peer education that's going is absolutely fantastic. I like that. I'm learning a lot from it. And please keep in touch with us on this. These are all the value chain you're going to look at. And I think I've commented here now that the Swiss chain, I think Susanna brought it very neatly into it. There was a Swiss cheese model, that every one of us has got an opportunity to stop that medication error happening, be it from the manufacturer, supply chain. And again, Susanna said very neatly that that's the point where control passes on. At the pharmacist is where the control passes on now to either the patient or the administrator of the drug, either the nurse or the health professional or self-care. And if you can control everything before that, like Fight the Fakes have said, let's take out all that fake drugs and then leave the last bits for us, then patients and nurses and doctors to sort out, it would be great. So that would be our much more smaller elephant to bite. The big elephant has to be bitten and chewed by everybody else, the regulators included, to ensure that what we have got to do at the end is make sure through our own health literacy, vigilance, and trust and reporting can remove that last medication harm vestiges that remain and then go forward. Neda, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kavaldeep, for sharing the perspectives. And obviously, patients need to interact, and they, in their interaction with different stakeholders, they can also bring and exercise their role, obviously, because it is for their safety, but also for healthcare system safety, for the health worker safety, and so on. We have seen a lot of exchange in the chat. Unfortunately, we cannot take many questions because we are almost 1 minute past the time, but I would still like to keep you all for 5 minutes more if you have time. I'm sure the panelists will not hold a grudge on me for keeping you for another 5 minutes. First of all, just to ask everyone if you would like to share your key message in one word or a couple of words. What would you say for people to bring back home? So maybe we start from Greg, from the back.
I think health system strengthening and patient safety are two sides of the same coin.
Thank you. Susanna, what would you say, a key message for the participants we have today from all over the world?
Yes, I think that the collaboration was today very much highlighted by everyone, and it's really crucial along the whole health system. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Susanna. Hoishan.
Thank you. I think Susanna took mine because I share the same. I would say collaboration, because I think from all the speakers, we know that not only healthcare workers, but we also need to work with patient, with the public, with the community, and so collaboration is really the key. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ottmar. Last but not least, I think the cherry on the cake.
Well, as I said before, patient safety will be hard to achieve without safety in healthcare in general. And to achieve that, a culture of responsibility would be very helpful.
Thank you. And I would just want to add from the patient's perspective, because every patient matters. And thank you everyone for being on this panel.